Okay, just some reminders. We finished up last week our little series on finding God in the ordinary. There's a lot more in that book by Trish Harrison Warren. It's a fun book to read, so it'd be great holiday reading. You need a recommendation. Next Sunday we'll start a new series in this class, looking at Isaiah chapter 9 and titles for Messiah and this messianic prophecy. Just taking up one each Sunday. Advent starts next Sunday, so sermon, class, and class will all be devoted to Advent type of topics. This Wednesday, we'll have a Thanksgiving devotional. Dale and Debbie will be leading that. I think Eddie will have a hand in that as well. We encourage you to be here in person if you possibly can.
It's the only way to get the donuts.
The only way to get donuts. We have not figured out how to make them digitally available. So we invite you to be here in person for that. Laconia, 1 week from Wednesday, Laconia will actually finish out our series taking questions, and then we'll start an Advent series on that tonight. Do want to encourage everybody who can to stick around after worship service. Today we've got a little special, very meaningful activity, which will culminate in the dedication of the kitchen in Community Room 2. So please stick around for that if you can. So this morning, yes.
Can I ask? Do you know how I'd like to see that? How long is that going to last? Do you know what it's all?
I would guess, I don't know, 15 minutes, something like that.
Yeah, maybe you do. Okay, thank you.
So this morning is sort of a tide over a bridge between series and things, since it's Thanksgiving week and we've been in the Psalms, Sunday morning preaching. We're going to root ourselves in Psalm 107 this morning, just a great psalm and particularly fitting for this week. All right, to get us thinking, if you could only have one food for Thanksgiving, what would it be? You know, I don't know why you're in a hurry and you only have time for one thing, or distribution problems, but you guaranteed one thing. What would the one food be, Rosemary?
My mom's sausage stuffing.
Sausage stuffing. I have never heard of such
But
thing.
she's gone, so I can only dream of it.
Oh my God.
Very
I've
interesting.
never heard of sausage
Okay.
stuff. Wow. I've never had it, but I've heard of it.
It's a southern thing.
Okay.
That gravy.
Okay. Great. Yeah.
I don't know. For me, it would have to be the turkey.
Okay. Hard to have things.
I've always been a carnivore.
Scott.
A hot buttered homemade roll.
Oh, okay.
Made by himself.
Yeah.
With gravy.
No, you can't.
It's also something.
No.
That is a southern. Everything has a
Robert.
Deborah's homemade gravy.
Oh.
Deborah, here come to our house.
What else? One food. It doesn't have to be a Thanksgiving food.
I was thinking back to the island.
Oh.
Cornmeal with black beans.
Cornmeal with black beans. All right.
What is that?
Oh, pecan pie.
Ah, yeah. Okay, there we go. So I was hoping somebody's gonna mention pie.
But not gravy.
Julie.
I was gonna say the same thing. I like to make this dressing that it's got some sausage in it.
Yeah. Okay.
You don't ever make it except for
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone else? One food.
I probably got the one that nobody would think of because I can only find them around Thanksgiving. It's turnips.
Turnips.
Fresh turnips. Oh. Yeah, see.
What do you do with them?
Yeah, you cube them and boil them, usually with either with butter and garlic or just butter.
And actually, in a southern vein, you can also cook them up. I don't know what my aunt did with them, but they can be very, very
Okay.
good. Not the way he makes them.
I believe you.
We'll take your
We're
word.
gonna try it.
Are those the yellow turnips or the white turnips?
Yellow.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I like the white ones, but I like the yellow ones.
At least I got some support.
Art,
can help Aaron, but I can eat all that.
you could eat what?
Beets.
Beets.
Superfood.
What form are they in? What form are they in?
Well, they're just cubed and they're cold, they're like in a salad and.
Yeah, okay, yeah, all right, all right. So all of the oddballs are coming out. Anybody else? One food.
Turkey, no, I take it back. Cooked cranberries. I didn't mean, I like turnips, but that's not the one food I couldn't do without. I'd do cooked cranberries, and I'd like to have some of that bread that was just mentioned a few minutes ago.
Good. All right, so these have nothing to do with one another, except I'm asking for one thing. All right, so this is a much more difficult question. What is the most fundamental thing you believe about God? When all else feels like mystery, when you can't make sense of anything else, what do you hold on to in terms of a core conviction about God? Or what if you had to summarize your entire theology, your entire experience, your entire doctrine of God in one word? What would that word be for you? There are no wrong answers here.
God is.
God is,
Love.
God is.
just God is.
Oh.
Okay. Okay. What else?
I like to think
Art?
love.
Love? Okay. Art?
I would use the word there, THERE.
Oh, okay, yeah. God is there, okay.
What immediately sprang to my mind is control. God is in control. No matter what happens, no matter how, I cannot see how this is ever going to work out. God does. God will, and it'll be okay.
Okay. Very good.
Inclusive.
Inclusive.
Justice,
Justice.
justice, or just.
Very good. Really?
Merciful.
Merciful, okay. Any other words that you really summarize what you most fundamentally believe about God?
Patient.
Patient,
God is all.
all, okay. I feel like that's cheating, but it's a good word. That's good. All right. I'll propose a word. The word chesed. Chesed,
Loving kindness.
and kindness. Everybody say chesed.
Chesed.
There we go. Yeah. In many ways, this is a good option for a one-word theology, a one-word summary of all good doctrine about God. It's used so many times in the Hebrew scriptures. Let me just survey some of the times it shows up in the book of Psalms. I was going to put them all down, but it would take most of our time just to read them all. It's remarkable. So it's frequently translated steadfast love. Sometimes it'll be translated slightly different, but steadfast love. Most of the time when you see that in the English translation in the Old Testament, it's chesed. But I, through the abundance of your steadfast love, will enter your house. Turn, O Lord, deliver my life, save me for the sake of your steadfast love. I've trusted in your steadfast love. Wondrously show your steadfast love. Great salvation he brings to the king and shows steadfast love to his anointed. The king trusts in the Lord, and through the steadfast love of the Most High, he shall not be moved. I think that's an interesting idea there. Through the steadfast love of God, you shall not be moved. Psalm 23, surely goodness and mercy. So that word mercy is steadfast love. Surely steadfast love, surely chesed shall follow me all the days of my life. That's a really nice image there. No matter where your journey takes you, no matter where you find yourself, close behind is the steadfast love of God. That's quite comforting. Remember your mercy, O Lord, and your steadfast love. Calling God to remember it. According to your steadfast love, remember me. Remember not the sins of my youth. All the paths of the Lord are steadfast love and faithfulness for those who keep his covenant and his testimonies. That's also a very interesting idea there, that all the paths that God leads us down are paths of steadfast love. And that could be difficult to trust, because not all paths feel like steadfast love. But this is what we're called to trust in. Psalm 26, for your steadfast love is before my eyes. That's what we look to, the steadfast love of God. Like I said, I will rejoice and be glad in your steadfast love. Save me in your steadfast love. He has wondrously shown his steadfast love. Steadfast love surrounds the one who trusts the Lord. The earth is full of the steadfast love of the Lord. The earth is full of the chesed of the Lord. Those who hope in a steadfast love, let your steadfast love be upon us. Your steadfast love, O Lord, extends to the heavens. There's no way to measure God's chesed. How precious is your steadfast love. Continue your steadfast love. I've not concealed your steadfast love. Your steadfast love preserves me. By day, the Lord commands his steadfast love. Redeem us for the sake of that steadfast love. We've fought on that love. Have mercy according to that love. Why do you boast, O evil, O mighty man? Steadfast love of God endures all the day. I trust in the steadfast love of God forever and ever. God will send out his steadfast love. Your steadfast love is great to the heavens. My God in steadfast love will meet me. I will sing aloud of your steadfast love. Just again and again and again and again. This is what the psalmists are meditating on. It's what prompts these poems and these songs. So we're going to be in Psalm 100. I brought it all the way up to Psalm 107. We're going to be in Psalm 107. But let's just think about this idea of steadfast love. Loyal love is another translation of it. It carries with it the sense of obligation, not on our part, but God's part. God feels an obligation toward us, and that obligation is chesed, steadfast love. It's entirely driven by him. It's his prerogative. It's his initiative, and it's not based on our worthiness or our ability to earn it in any way. It's his gift of grace, his chesed. What do you think? I mean, of all the things that you might say about God, and that we did say earlier, what do you think might change in your life if chesed, if you really believe fundamentally this? There are things I don't know. Fundamentally, this is what I do know about God. He is a God of steadfast love. He's a God of chesed. Just what might change in your life if that was your core conviction about God?
You wouldn't worry about tomorrow.
Okay, why?
Well, if there's steadfast love, there is no need to fear the future. Uphold you, keep you safe, guide you, protect you.
Okay, good. And
I think to go hand in hand with what Rosemary said, you'd be more quickly be able to accept whatever comes into your life at any one moment.
okay, why?
Because if you were being given steadfast love, then you can understand that what's happening to you is happening to you through a channel of love.
Hmm.
And so therefore, I think it would allow you to feel more open to whatever happens.
John?
I think we would want to mirror that behavior. Like we would want to learn to show it ourselves.
David and then Art.
I think it's, that's what I think of parenting as well. And it doesn't necessarily mean that everything is going to be rainbows and uniforms. Sometimes we have to act in a loving way to our child, and he or she may not feel that loving nature right away. But it might be that for a long time.
Okay.
So as Christians, sometimes the love isn't going to be what we want. It might be what we need, it might not be what we want.
Okay, good. Art?
Yeah, my comment's pretty similar to John's comment, and I never thought of God as being obligated to me. But if he is, then I must do better, and I must reflect it back.
Okay, good. Aaron?
Well, if we truly believe that, that God is steadfast love, like that, then it makes it much easier to trust him. Yeah, I'm gonna kind of jump off of do the reverse side of what David was saying. I mean, my mother could have handed me a glass of bleach and I would have drank it because I trusted her that much. It's that kind of trust that no matter what happens to you, what situations come your way, if you steadfastly trusted God, if he is steadfast love, he is going to be there with you.
Okay. Pete?
Going to what David said, as a parent, I remember something happened to Kevin after I did it, after that was cool. At the shop, right, janitor was just finished cleaning the floor like this, and Kevin had the sneakers, and he was making squeak, and they were all back, he was laughing. I asked him to stop. He kept doing it, so I insisted to get the mop on this guy and give it to Kevin on Saturday morning, and have Kevin do every bit of it. And people were giving me eyes, and Kevin was fuming, didn't talk to me. And in his outdoor life, that's something you always refer back to. Or the most education plan.
I would have been cheering.
That you just write that.
Yeah.
Yes.
He always, and I felt guilty after I did it. But I used to don't like it. Every time he's with us, when he says, "Hey, this is what my dad did to me."
But that was steadfast love.
Yes.
That's good. Scott?
Being fearless.
Oh, okay.
I was gonna say, I was thinking along the terms of what Scott was saying. I think I would be calmer, because you wouldn't have anything to be fearful of, because love is steadfast. So you'd be calmer.
Good. Well, let's look in Psalm 107. Let's just look at the connection here between Chesed and thankfulness, since we're moving into this week of Thanksgiving. This psalm majors in connecting these two dots between understanding God is fundamentally a God of Chesed and giving thanks in response. So we have this refrain of thanks through the psalm, verse 1. Oh, give thanks to the Lord. Let them thank the Lord. Verse 8. Let them thank the Lord. Verse 15. Let them thank the Lord. Verse 21. Let them thank the Lord. Verse 31. Again, and again, the call of the psalm is to give thanks to the Lord. Now, a lot of times when we think about giving thanks to God, that thanksgiving is driven by two things. Maybe it's something that God has done, and we recognize that, and so we give thanks to God. Or maybe it's something that God is. This is who God is, and so we give thanks to God for his character, for his nature. Now, obviously, these two things are connected. What God does is always connected to who God is. And so we might give thanks for something he's done and the way it reflects his character. we might give thanks for his character and nature and the way it's been expressed in something that he's done. But these two things sort of drive the giving of thanks. And there are times when we don't fully, either we don't see what God has done, or we don't grasp the significance of what God has done, or we don't understand what God has done. And in those times, we have to go back to, well, in spite of that, or because of that, I nonetheless still believe God is this kind of God. I still believe God is a God of chesed. And that's what this psalm does. It drives us back to the fundamental nature of God, the fundamental character of God as a God of chesed. And because we know that, we can trust, we can give thanks to God. So Psalm 107 leads us to give thanks because of who God is. He's a God of chesed. It manifests itself in certain ways, but over and over, it simply calls us to his nature as a God of steadfast love. So just as you have the refrain of giving thanks, you have the refrain of this description of God. So it starts out, verse 1, "Oh, give thanks, for his steadfast love endures forever." Verse 8, "Let them thank the Lord for his steadfast love." Verse 15, "Let them thank the Lord for his steadfast love." Verse 21, "Let them thank the Lord for his steadfast love." Verse 31, "Let them thank the Lord for his steadfast love." And 43, ending it, "Let them consider the steadfast love of the Lord." So the psalm ends with this, okay, I've done everything I can to describe the steadfast love of the Lord. Now, please continue to ponder it. Please continue to consider it. Continue to think on it after you end the psalm. So the psalm is urging the members of the community of God to give thanks for God's steadfast love. And it does this by leading us through 4 accounts of people in the community of God who've endured some distress, some trouble, some very difficult times, and yet in those difficult times, they experience the chesed of God, the steadfast love of God. And while these 4 cases are very seemingly specific, they're intended also to open up windows for us to say, "Oh yeah, that was me. Oh yes, that was us. Oh, we've experienced that as well." And in the midst of this distress, we've experienced the steadfast love of God. So the psalm opens, "Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for steadfast love endures forever. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, whom he's redeemed from trouble and gathered in from the lands, from the east, from the west, from the north, and from the south." So we kind of have this compass set before us, north, south, east, west, and then that compass is sort of fleshed out as we get 4 pictures of people from around the compass who are experiencing trouble and distress, and yet in that trouble and distress, they also experience the steadfast love of God. And so maybe as a symbolic way of saying, it doesn't matter where you find yourself on the compass, north, south, east, west, any of those locations is a location where you can find the steadfast love of God and where you can give thanks. So no matter where this week takes you, no matter where you are in the compass, this can be a time of thanksgiving because of the steadfast love of God. Notice in this psalm how chesed and the experience of chesed comes in the context of suffering. And one of the points the psalm seems to be making is that suffering is often when we have the potential to best experience God as a God of steadfast love. So you notice these descriptions of the 4 people in the community of God who've experienced the steadfast love of God. The first one is verse 4. "Some wandered in desert wastes, finding no way to a city to dwell in, hungry and thirsty, their soul fainted within them." So here,
Sorry, could you say that again? My apologies. apologies.
Sorry.
So here are people who are homeless, mealless, hungry, and thirsty, and yet they experience the steadfast love of God. The next one is verse 10. Some sat in darkness and in the shadow of death. Sounds like Psalm 23. Prisoners in affliction and in irons. So these are people experiencing the opposite of freedom. They're restricted in some way, hindered in some way, and yet even in darkness, they find the steadfast love of God. The third one is 17 and 18. Some were fools through their sinful ways, and because of their iniquities suffered affliction. They loathed any kind of food. They drew near the gates of death. So even individuals suffering the consequences of their own sinful actions experience steadfast love of God. And the fourth one, and starting in verse 23, some went down to the sea in ships, doing business on the great waters. They saw the deeds of the Lord, his wondrous works in the deep, for he commanded and raised the stormy wind, which lifted up the waves of the sea. They mounted up to heaven. They went down to the depths. Their courage melted away in their evil plight. They reeled and staggered like drunken men and were at their wits' end. Right, a giant ship on a giant ocean in a giant storm. And these passengers are fearing for their lives. And yet they're on the ocean, on the storm, in the midst of the storm, especially in the Hebrew scriptures, water being a symbol of evil or darkness or chaos. Even there, they experience the steadfast love of God. So suffering, I think the psalm is telling us, suffering is often where and when we experience the steadfast love of God, which may be counterintuitive to us, but that's what the psalm reminds us. All right, so going through each of these four briefly. Some wandered in desert, and notice the refrains that get repeated in each of these four. Some wandered in desert wastes, finding no way to a city to dwell in, hungry and thirsty, their soul fainted. They cried to the Lord in their trouble. We'll see this 4 times. He delivered them from their distress. We'll see this 4 times. He led them by a straight way till they reached a city to dwell in. Let them thank the Lord for his steadfast love. 4 times. It'll show up. 4, he satisfies the longing soul, the hungry soul, and he fills with good things. So whatever they were suffering, there was resolution to it. And they look back upon that and they say, there was the steadfast love of God. So it's not, oh, hooray, we've never suffered. Our life has been full of joy and peace and prosperity. It's, oh man, life could not have been worse. And there was the steadfast love of God. John.
I think there are 2 gifts that we have in this group. Here we have the gift of age or time, and we have the gift of community. And, not to put Julie on the spot or Penelope on the spot, but they haven't lived as long as some of us. They haven't seen the suffering that we have seen and God's response to that. But we're here to say it happens. We've seen it. And whether you experience it in your own life or you witness someone in this room suffering, which we have, we've seen that response. And so you don't have to become 65 years old to have confidence in God's response to us and his commitment to us. The witnesses are right here in our own experience. And I hope Julia doesn't have to age 65 to have confidence in God's steadfast love. It's right in front of you.
Yeah. Thank you. The second example, right? Verse 10, some sat in darkness in the shadow of death, prisoners in affliction and irons. But they had rebelled against the words of God, spurned the counsel of the Most High. Some scholars think all 4 of these descriptions are descriptions of, in some way, of the people of God in exile. 4 different windows into what it was like for them to be in exile. And so in some ways, in all 4, we may be looking at people paying the consequences for their own their own actions, and nevertheless experiencing the steadfast love of God. So he bowed their hearts down with hard labor. They fell down with none to help. Here's the repetition. They cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them from their distress. He brought them out of darkness, the shadow of death, and burst their bonds apart. Let them thank the Lord for his steadfast love, for his wondrous works to the children of man. He shatters the doors of bronze and cuts into the bars of iron. So it's not, oh yes, we've never been in prison, we've never suffered a lack of freedom in our lives. No, it's yes, we have, and we experience the steadfast love of God. The third group, fools through their sinful ways, because of their iniquities, they loathed food, they drew near to the gates of death. Here's the repetition. They cried to the Lord in their trouble. He delivered them from their distress. He sent out his word and healed them and delivered them from destruction. Let them thank the Lord for steadfast love, for his wondrous works to the children of man, and let them offer sacrifices of thanksgiving and tell of his deeds and songs of joy. And then the last group, number 4, went down to the sea in ships. We read all of that. We'll get down to verse 28, the repetition. They cried to the Lord in their trouble. He delivered them from their distress. He made the storm be still. The waves and sea were hushed. Where it sounds a lot like some of the scenes in the Gospels, right? Jesus still in the storm. And they were glad, and the waters were quiet, and he brought them to their desired haven. Let them thank the Lord for his steadfast love, for his wondrous works to the children of man. Let them extol him in the congregation of the people and praise him in the assembly of the elders. There's a lot of what John talked about going on in the psalm, and people standing and saying, but yes, we, and everybody else going, oh, yes, let's give thanks to God for that. And then there's this long section from 33 through 42 where the author of the psalm basically says, and it doesn't just happen in those 4 cases. It happens again and again and again. This is what God does for his people. He turns negatively. He turns rivers into desert, water into thirsty ground, fruitful land into salty waste because of the evil of its inhabitants. Then positively, he turns the desert into pools of water, a parched land into springs of water, and there he lets the hungry dwell. They establish a city to live in. When they're diminished and brought low through oppression, evil, and sorrow, he pours contempt on princes, makes them wander trackless wastes, but he raises up the needy out of affliction. This is what Mary sings about in the Magnificat. It's the great reversal that happens throughout Scripture, where God is taking those who are low and in need and lifting them up, and then taking those who are oppressing them and bringing them low. All of which is a manifestation of the steadfast love of God, of God. And so the psalm ends again in verse 43. Whoever is wise, let him attend to these things. Let them consider the steadfast love of the Lord. So nice little proverb here. If you want to be wise, think about the steadfast love of God. Think wise people are people who understand the hesed of God. Which is probably a line that needs to be heard in a world where we so often think, well, the wise person is the one who knows everything. Or the wise person is the one who can quote scripture. The wise person who understands the steadfast love of God. So let me stop there. As we sort of walk through that song, how have you experienced God's loving kindness in times of distress or trouble? And how does Hesed prompt thanksgiving as you think about it, especially this week?
Well, as I've gotten older, I've been very thankful. I was born in a time. I had childhood epilepsy, which surfaced when I was 6, and I had a seizure. And my mother got me to the hospital, and I took medication from that time till I was 13. But I sometimes thought, you know, if I'd been born in a time of less medical advancement, I could die anytime I had a seizure. Or my mother and I could have been burned as witches at Salem. And that's maybe weird to think of that, but I thank God for that. And just anytime, you know, we're having financial trouble, we still have our house. We have this church to come to as our family, and God's going to take care of it. Just anytime, I mean, I had a car accident. I could have been knocked unconscious. I could have burned up in that car. I don't know if I borrowed trouble, if I can count all these times when God saved my life. And now I don't know where I was going exactly, but those are the times I can think of.
Yeah, so you can look back on your life and you can see these moments.
Yeah.
Where you experience the love and kindness of God. Julie?
Well, one of the things that I'm saying is I feel so out of trouble almost all the time. And I think that it's overarching sometimes blessings that, well, things that could have been trouble. You know, same time too, I do feel blessed and thankful that we haven't seen a lot of trouble. But I do you know,
Chris?
We used to sing this wonderful song. I believe it was in this church. Lord never ceases. His mercies never.
Yeah.
Wednesday night, we talked about how a lot of us first conceived of God, which was anything but loving kindness and steadfast love. Our first response to God was maybe one of fear and efforts to be good enough. And I mention that because this particular psalm was the text for in my life way back. John, thank you for affirming age as a gift, and probably a lot of emphasis on saying so, but before they got to that, there was an enormous emphasis on the mercy, the loving. If you think about those days, you know, we were kind of between the sentiment and things in the world were kind of a mess. And for the first time in my life, I really deeply felt and embraced largely through the exposition of the words of this psalm, God's loving kindness, God's steadfast love. And it was the beginning of a series of salvation, salvific moments, if you will, of, being saved again and again and again and again and again through the years and the decades. But I look back to that moment as kind of a door opening and an opportunity to embrace for the first time, as I said before, through the words of this psalm, the steadfast love of the Lord. So it's very powerful for me.
Thank you, Jane. Our time is, and so let's end with that. Thank you, everybody, for sharing thoughts from the
Thank you.
psalm.
Thank you for.
We'll see you, Jane, Craig.
Ciao, ciao.
Chris.